And welcome back to our Biz Buzz video series. And we are going way back when to our not our very first episode, but our second episode for this week's Biz Buzz video. And this is our publishing grab bag. So we each took, Colleen, KZ, and myself, a topic that we thought was very pertinent to the publishing world, specifically the self-publishing world, and we each shared a little bit about our thoughts on why that was so important and how that ties into the publishing process. So Colleen talks about editing and proofreading, KZ talks about royalty rights, and then I ask the question, who is the customer? So we go through all of these topics, and we each discuss with each other on these three topics. And that puts together our publishing Biz Buzz grab bag for this week's Biz Buzz video. If you enjoy these videos, please be sure to like and subscribe to the Author's Voice YouTube channel. It really helps us grow. And also, tell your friends about it. I know you're not just a writer by yourself, so please be sure to let your other writer friends know about the Author's Voice. Send them over to our YouTube channel here, or onto the Blank Page to Bestseller podcast, where you can find all of our Biz Buzz topics, and you can find that wherever you listen to podcasts. So without further ado, here is our publishing grab bag from all the way back in September 2023. Hello, and I am excited to start today's Biz Buzz off with a special self-publishing grab bag. For this episode, me, Candy, and Colleen are going to go and share just a short little introductory topic about self-publishing. For myself, I'm going to talk about who is the customer. Colleen's going to share a little bit about editing and proofreading, and KZ is going to talk about royalty rights. So let's kick the grab bag off with KZ, and she's going to talk a little bit about what royalty rights are.
Oh, that sounds great, Peter. One of my favorite topics, actually, is I love it when I see an author begin to make some money out of their usually passion project. Most people who are writing and are publishing really feel passionate about the writing, and oftentimes the income is secondary. And to my way of thinking about it, your business should be a book, and so the income should not be secondary. It should be an important part of the whole process. So this is meant to be a short bite. I'm going to go over a little bit about what royalty is in general, and also defining how and when royalty is given differently, because there's a huge range of income that's available depending on how you choose to publish your book. And then later on in upcoming episodes, this will be one of our main topics for an entire episode. So if you have questions, be sure to follow up with us so that we can address those when we record the next session. In the meantime, though, let's go forward with this. And I want to talk first about what a royalty is. A royalty is very simply, at the very basic level, it is what the writer is paid for his creative work or her creative work. Okay. So when you write a book, if you never publish it, you're never going to make any money. But when you publish the book and make it public, you have to go through a process of first creating it, writing it, then you have to go through the process of getting it into a format that is consumable by the public, and then you have to get it distributed. And all of this process after writing it is called publishing. And when you publish, you as the writer earn a royalty. Simply put, a payment for your work. You're paid you should be paid based on every book that is sold. You receive a percentage of that sale. Every book that is sold any place in the world should garner you a percentage of that sale. That's a royalty. Now, there are two ways to do this: traditional publishing and self-publishing. And there are categories within each, but we're going to keep this simple. Traditional publishing is the old model, and it's still a viable model, where the publisher has all of the rights to your book. The publisher will they define all of the terms. They make all the decisions as far as the process of marketing the book, and also in many cases how the book itself is finally edited. They make the decisions, and publishing can take usually almost always at least 2 years, sometimes longer. Okay. The self-publishing process is where the author chooses to not only write the book, but also publish it and keep all the rights. The author makes all of the decisions, and the author can put that book out on shelves and have it be for sale as soon as it's created, as soon as it's written and edited. So why wouldn't everyone go to self-publishing? Because you can keep control. Well, because that process of taking the book from its creative nub and putting it into a finished product and distributing it is a lot of steps. It's a business, going back to what we talked about at the very beginning. So the decision you make for how you publish your book has a great deal to do with your commitment and ability to run a business. If you are someone who has a great idea for a book and you simply want to get it out there and you want to write it, you write it and you go into the traditional model. And if you're lucky, you'll be picked up by a publisher and they will take care of everything. Okay. You will get a much lower percentage of commission, of royalty on that, because the publisher, the traditional publisher, is taking on all of the responsibility. Okay. In traditional publishing, the publisher will give the author an advantage, not an advantage, will give the author an advance, typically for a first-time author, a few $1,000s, okay? And then the royalty that they will receive will be anywhere from 5 to 18%. It's pretty much the top is 18% from a traditional publisher for a first-time author, and for many multiple-time authors. Then you will receive, but not then. The percentage that you receive, whatever is agreed to in your contract, doesn't come into effect until you have paid back. They call it earning out. You have to earn out the advance. So if you get a $2,000 advance, you won't receive any royalties until your royalty percentage has built up to $2,000 and has covered that advance. Okay. I know it's cryptic and I don't want to get into a lot of details here. Okay. I simply want to give you an idea of what it means and why you have to carefully consider how you're going to make your publishing launch. Okay. Now let's talk about small press and self-publishing. Self-publishing is where you choose all the options. You have all the control. You also take on all the responsibility and you get all the benefit. With self-publishing, your royalties are going to be anywhere between 35 and 70%. Okay. Why is it only 70%? Well, because the actual physical process of publishing, there are costs. There are actual physical costs to produce a book. So that 30% or that 70% that the actual publisher, even though you are a self-publishing, there is a company that is doing that process for you. And they do earn their 30%. So it's essentially the reverse of traditional publishing. When you're self-publishing, it's reversed. You earn most of the commission, and the actual costs involved are absorbed into the rest of the commission, the royalty. Small press is a form of self-publishing, and if you are working with a small press, that's a company that offers the publishing arm of the process and may also offer the editing arm of the process. There are many different types of self-publishers, and we're going to go into that in another date. But that particular type of arrangement will provide you with some place between 18 and 25% of your royalty, because that self-publisher, that small press publisher, is actually still taking on a higher percentage of the responsibility. And they also have to maintain the royalty records because they're getting the full royalty paid to them. Okay, and then they have to pay you out. So there's a lot of overhead for a small press, just as there is for a traditional publisher. Okay, I don't want to get any more detail than this, but I want to give you a couple of numbers, okay? Just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here. This is what I'll end with. So whichever way you choose to go with your royalties, as far as earning royalties are concerned, if you go with traditional publishing and sell 6,000 ebooks, okay, priced at $7, for example, your earnings on that would be $10,650. So $10,000 for a traditionally published book that earns out at 6,000 books. Okay. For self-published, same numbers, 6,000 books, $7 a book. There's paperback in there as well, but just to give you the basics there, your earnings are $51,600. So the money is much higher for self-publishing, and so is the responsibility. The traditional publishing earnings are much lower for almost every author, but the responsibility is not there. What you are able to do in traditional publishing is strictly be an author. What you have to do in self-publishing is be a business person and an author. I hope this has helped clarify some of this for some of you.
No, that's a great overview of just the different, I mean, it's not just about royalties, but about the different types of publishing as well, Candy. And I think for sure, like you said, we'll have to go into a little bit more depth in a future episode on this, because there's just so much to cover. And, that's really the goal of the podcast, is to help kind of peel the veil behind, take a peek behind the veil of all of these different publishing options for authors, for writers, for anyone helping authors.
Absolutely. And we have tons of experience here at the Author's Voice to be able to help you all to understand exactly what the right options are, so that you can choose the one that's right for you.
Yeah, I think that's really great. One of the things that you mentioned in both types of publishing is editing. And I think editing is one of the paramount processes that people always kind of forget about. So I do want to turn this over to Colleen to share a little bit about editing and proofreading, because, as I'm sure she'll tell you, they are different things. So I'd love to have her take a little bit of a deeper look at what editing and proofreading is for authors.
Well, thanks, Peter and Candy. Your information was great. And yes, editing, proofreading is an investment in your book and your business. And like Candy said, your book is a business. And that's what we really educate our authors on, is that your book is a business. To make money on your book is so important. You've spent the time writing it. You spent the money having it published, whether that's self-publishing or however you go about that. But you want to make money on your book. Make sure it's priced right and all that type of stuff. But anyway, today I'm going to talk to you about editing and the parts of editing. There's really three parts to the editing process, which is developmental editing, line or general editing, and then the proofreading process. And so I'm just going to go into little detail today and then talk about it more in future episodes. So you have written your story, you've spent the time, and I'm going to tell you that you need a professional editor and proofreader for your book. We've had authors in the past tell us that they wanted to have their mom proof their book because she was an atheist and it was a Christian book, and she was hoping that her mom would convert. And we were like, okay, really, even if you want your mom to proof it, or your aunt or your cousin, your next door neighbor, are they really going to give you the critique that you need? Are they going to tell you what's needed and what needs to be changed so that you can make your book your business and it can be clear and cohesive? So developmental, it starts with the overarching big picture of your book and your content. So you want to look for errors in that overarching story, which that consists of making sure, is your story flowing? Does it need to be changed? Do some paragraphs need to be brought from the bottom up into a new section? Are your paragraphs cohesive? Are you talking about one thing, but then you happen to start talking about another element that needs to go down into a different section or paragraph of your book? So that's developmental editing, going over the overarching part of your book, the big story. Then we go into the line or general editing, it can be called, and that is focusing on the smaller details. So is the author using the correct word choice? Are they using the same word over and over and over again? And they could use something like a different word that means the same thing, because you want to have variety in your writing. So making sure that the author's using the correct word choice, but also not the same word over and over. Is a writer using the active voice instead of the passive voice? Yes, there are times when passive voice can be used in editing or in writing your book, but it's easier for the person to read, the reader of your book, to read in the active voice. Either way, you want to make sure it's consistent for what you are talking about. And then consistency in character details. If you're writing a fiction book, are you talking about Sally and she has blue eyes and blonde hair in one part, but then when you get down to chapter 10, is Sally a brunette with brown eyes? So you want to make sure that your characters are cohesive and everything is the same, and keeping consistency in those small details. Yes, they're small, but they are important. And that's when you change this information in the line in general editing. Then we go into the proofing process, which is the final part of your, after everything has been edited and the developmental and the line has been changed, the proofing process comes in. This is where we look for things that are consistency in grammar, capitalization, names, numbers, punctuation, all of that needs to be correct, because you want your book to be as professional as it can be. And I'm going to give you a little case history story that is true, that I think is important and might bring some light to what you're understanding here. So poor proofreading, it doesn't mean life or death in your business or kill your book or your reputation, but it can. It can kill your people who want to buy your book. That means, this is a true story of someone, a friend and a colleague of mine that I worked with. And I was visiting her house, and she had just received a printer's proof of a book she was working on. And I was not working on this book with her, but I said, hey, can I read this book? And she said, sure. And it was a little small book, but while I wasn't reading it for corrections, I was reading it for the information. I noticed that there was an error on her acknowledgement page. And it was a very notable high-level business coach's name, and it was misspelled. And this lady had even coached with this coach. And I was like, wow, okay. I had a pencil in my hand, so I just made a small little mark in the book. And I kept reading. And then after a bit of time, I asked my friend if her copy had been proofread, and she said yes. Well, at this point, I had noticed there were already like 10 misspelled words and other issues in her printer's proof. So I wasn't quite sure how to broach the subject to her, but I mentioned it to her, and she was really shocked, to say the least. So my friend then asked me if I would proof it. And of course, I said yes, because that's what I love to do. So after proofing the book, I came to the bibliography, and my brain said, well, this has been professionally proofed. I shouldn't really have to review it, but because of my ethics, I said, okay, bibliographies are really no fun to check, but I pride myself on finishing a job no matter what. So while I was verifying the references, I came across an author's name and the title of a book, and both were misspelled. So I was so happy that I went ahead and did it, because that's what I do. And I mentioned that to my friend. Well, anyway, editing, this is so crucial. Proofreading and editing is crucial for your book. We always say an author can write their first book, but will they be able to write a second book? Because if people notice the misspellings and it's not professionally done, then who's going to want to buy your second book? So it is an investment for your business. And it's important for you to have a second set of eyes read it, whether it's a blog, your book, whatever it is. Ask someone to check it out, because your book is your business. And that's what I have to say about proofreading and editing right now, but I'll go into more detail in future episodes. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, thanks for sharing those differences between the different editing processes. I know it's so important. I love how you pointed out anyone can write one book, but not everyone can write two. I think that's so important, because one of the areas that we've talked about too is in the past, especially for business owners, people who are coaches, etc. A book is almost like a business card. If you give it to someone, people will learn who you are, learn about you and your business. But if there's errors and misspellings and big issues with the book, they're going to know that, hey, they may not want to work with you in the future.
Yeah, it's really true. And it's kind of funny how my eyes just have always gone to that. Even when I was used to read the newspaper, when we had newspapers come out, and I would notice something and people would laugh at me, but it's kind of funny how it'll stick out for some people, but not everybody. But do you really want those mistakes going out there?
Absolutely. And I love the point you made, Colleen, about not having your neighbor or your best friend do the editing. You do need to hire a professional, and it's well worth the extra, really minimal amount of money to hire a professional.
Yeah, I think so. And not just because I love doing it, but it helps your reputation as an author and a business person.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely think that we're going to have to go a little bit more in depth on each of those processes in the future episodes. But I think for today's Biz Buzz, I'm going to close us out by asking you a simple question: who is the customer? So Candy earlier shared that there's different types of publishing. There's traditional publishing, there's self-publishing, and there's even different types of publishing within the self-publishing. One of the things that we really, really try to educate authors on is to have them ask, who is the customer? Too often, there are some, let's just say, not so ethical publishers out there in the world who will I don't know how to put this nicely. Basically, the question is, who's the customer? Is the person publishing the book trying to sell books to readers, whereas they would go out to the bookstores, get books there, get books into Amazon, etc.? Or is the person publishing your book trying to sell you, the author, to make money off of you? Because that's where the real success comes from, is when you're selling your book. You want to make sure you're selling your book and not just being someone that is stuffing the pockets of a publisher who's not actually going out there to sell your books. So you really I would say most traditional publishers that you would recognize are going to be their main customer is the reader. Think of it like that. They're not trying to get more Stephen Kings because they're making money off of Stephen King. They're trying to get Stephen King's in there because he sells millions of copies of books and that lines their pocket. There are some publishers, though, some self-publishing companies who they're not trying to sell books. Their main audience is not the reader. Their main audience is more authors that they can charge $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 to make money off of the author, and then the author ends up selling 10, 20, 30 books maybe. One of the main ways that I can kind of tell who the author or who the customer is if you get a contract with a publishing company, take a look at if there are things like, if you have to buy a certain number of books. That's there are some places that will make you buy 50, 100, 500 copies of the book right when you publish the book, and that right there is a key identifier on someone who's trying to just make money off of the author and not actually sell you the book, because for them that's showing that people are buying the book, but they're not actually being sold to people who are readers. They're just being sold to you. Another way that you want to keep an eye out on is, like KZ was talking about earlier, royalty rights. There are some self-publishing companies that will charge or give you very little, if any, royalty rights. So if you are not making royalties, that's another big warning sign that goes off and says, hey, maybe the author's the customer and not the reader. So those are two really big areas that I want to kind of shed some light on. But I will say, I think most, if not all, traditional publishers are, sticking up for you. So you really have, well, they're not sticking up for you, but they're at least treating the author as not a customer. And it's really these smaller self-publishing companies that are where you want to keep a little bit more of a close eye at what you're doing. So I don't know if KZ or Colleen, if you have anything to add on what we've talked about today, but that's my Biz Buzz.
I think I'll just add on a bit on what you just said, and I want to say that don't be afraid to discuss your book options with a small press publisher. Simply be aware that there are what we have called them in the past vanity press. That's what Peter is describing, and they are sneaky. I'm sorry, there's no other way to say it. They are sneaky. They change the names of their companies because they get caught in, and then they pop up again someplace else. Same people, different name. So there are be aware and educate yourself. That's the big key. As a writer, if you're interested in book publishing and becoming a published writer, published author, make sure that you are taking the time to educate yourself. Mm-hmm. That is the key premise behind the author's voice is we fully are engaged in educating everyone who wants to learn about writing and publishing.
One thing I do want to add on that, since you brought it up, vanity presses especially, is take a look at their catalog. If they have an online catalog, you can actually learn quite a bit if you look at what books they have for sale, because some of these vanity presses or these small press publishers, whatever we're calling them today, they are not in one niche audience. They'll have books that cover any and every topic. And if you're really a publisher, you're going to want to focus in on, because to narrow down the audience into one area, whether that be, romance, whether that be general fiction, whether that be nonfiction, a press that is focused on one specific genre is going to usually be a little bit more author friendly, let's say it that way. So if you're seeing people that have 18-20 different genres for 20 different authors, another warning sign might be popping up in your head.
I have a little story to add to that real quick. Is before I knew what I knew, before I became a certified author assistant, certified publishing professional, I was taken by a vanity press, meaning that I spent a long time writing this tip book. It was a tip book, a marketing tip book, and I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know about getting my own ISBN. I didn't know about setting up my own self-publishing company. I didn't know about having someone proof what I had written, etc., etc. And so that book was so poor that I spent money getting it published, not by myself, but this vanity publisher, and I do not even market the book. That's how bad it was. And I didn't know what I didn't know. So education is so important. Once you know what you know and you've learned what you learned, you can either then do it yourself or have a professional help you, or do it both, have it both ways, but have someone professional help you so that your time and your energy and your money is worth and well spent.
Absolutely. Well said. Well spoken, Colleen.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to thank KZ and Colleen again for sharing their own perspectives on all these topics today. And it's been a great informational day, I think, on the Biz Buzz. And I think in the future, we'll have to go more in depth on each one of these topics. And, as we go through and talk about all of these publishing tasks, hopefully you, the listener, will learn a little bit. And we do want to ask you, the listener, if you have any questions or topics or ideas on what you want to hear about from us on the Biz Buzz, please feel free to let us know. We'll have information on that down in the show comments. But thank you both for helping us talk a little bit about the publishing grab bag today.
You're welcome.
Thanks.